All right, you got it.
Great. Good afternoon. Yesterday, I think we had 8 people watching us. So if those 8 people are back watching us today, good afternoon. It is Wednesday, January 18th, 1:30 in the afternoon. This is Senate Education. Just a couple of housekeeping things, folks. Tomorrow, we are going to do lunch with the Superintendent's Association, which is going to be right over in the Capitol Plaza. So we'll all meet over there about noon. We'll do lunch, and then they're going to do a little bit of a conversation with us, and we'll be back here probably about 2 o'clock. Is that the stuff? Okay. Even though we have test scores at 2:30, right? Okay. All right. So scheduled a little bit in flux, but we our plan is to go over. I don't know if you were here when they invited us.
I don't know.
Yeah, so if people have other meetings, totally get it, but hopefully everyone will be able to join us then for the lunch tomorrow at noon, and then stick around a little bit for a conversation with the superintendents at Capitol Plaza. What I thought we would do right now before Sue Siglowski comes in at about 1:50 is just talk a little bit. It's on our agenda for Friday, but I thought I'd do it now so we can leave a little early on Friday. And that really is just have a bit of a committee discussion. It says Teach in Vermont campaign, but I think there's a committee discussion around where everybody thinks we're at in terms of what's percolating up in terms of priorities. This is helpful for me as the chair, just to say, hey, this is what I think people are talking about. This is by no means an endorsement of bills. You know, if you might hear, gosh, I think the Teach in Vermont campaign is a priority. Doesn't mean you'd have to vote for it. Just means really that these are the kinds of things that we would be working on over in the coming weeks. So what I have down, what I've heard from all of you is certainly a conversation. Can you continue the conversation around school construction? I know Senator Gulick is working on a bill related to that. She may want others to sign on to it, but we'll continue along that line. Around COVID recovery, specifically under their mental health supports in our schools and universal school meals. The governor, the administration is coming in this week to talk more about school safety. What does that look like? We're going to start to take testimony on that. Actually, I'm sorry, that we're going to pick up next week with the governor, with the administration's proposed bill that Dan French took us all through, and we'll start to take some testimony on that. Certainly the Teach in Vermont campaign seems to me really interesting, compelling. How can we get teachers here? What sorts of things can we offer them in this very competitive environment where workforce issues are huge? And then I'd say the other thing that we'll start looking at a little bit today is the question of equity. What is it that some of our larger schools have that our smaller schools don't have? Does everybody have the technology that they need? We're hearing, I believe today from Christine Holquist, yes, at 3:30, broadband in schools. How can we support those small schools that might not have the same opportunities as our bigger schools? I don't necessarily think this is an urban-rural divide, but my gut is when we hear from Secretary French on this issue, I'm inclined to think the rural schools might have more equity issues around offerings and things like that. And then the overarching for me, is I would say, how are we going to continue to deal with the test scores that we saw last week and that were presented to us? And we're going to jump back into that a little bit. I believe tomorrow we're going to, Agency of Education is going to come in and talk how our scores compared with other New England states, and really help us to understand some of our goals around literacy and math. I mean, so those are the things that seem to be percolating up. And I don't know if anybody wants to add anything, subtract anything, disagree with anything. And again, this isn't there's no way I would support this or, any kind of hey, this sounds right to me, doesn't mean you vote for it, but just generally what I'm hearing. Senator Sheen.
Sure. So the Teach in Vermont campaign, throughout the last year, I was thinking a lot about how we can approach student loan forgiveness as well for not just teachers, but also nurses and people who enter the trades. And, my thought is, not something that's just, a blanket dismissal of all loans or, providing grants to people. I'm thinking if somebody comes to Vermont or gets their education in Vermont, they start teaching in Vermont, for every year that they live here, maybe we can do something where we, help them pay back a semester of their loans or, 2 semesters of their loans. And, that creates incentive to stay here for a longer time. And the longer that somebody stays here, the more of a social network they'll develop, the more they'll get involved in their communities, and they'll be less inclined to leave, in my opinion. So that's something that I'd really like to look at. And I also heard over the weekend from a constituent who formerly sat on a school board, the idea of providing a 529 account or opening a 529 account for every student in the state, not necessarily putting money from the state in, but letting people know that, hey, there's this account here. We set it up for you. We all you have to do is just start putting in some money. And, if there is capacity for it, maybe, doing a match, if we have the ability to do it, maybe, up to a couple $100, if, let's say advertising it like, we open up this account. If you put in $100 in the next 6 months to a year, the state will match it with another $100 and then, close off that matching after a year or so. Yeah. And so I think, if we want to tailor it and make it more narrowly focused, maybe that's another thing. We could make it more narrowly focused for if a student wants to just go into the trades, or if a student just wants to go become a nurse or a teacher. One of the challenges could be, though, is controlling how that money is being spent, if we're providing folks with that. But that's just an idea that was percolating over the weekend. Universal school meals is a pretty high up there on my priority list. So I hope that we make sure to revisit that. And, the equity piece, I have a lot of smaller schools in my district, and, a lot of them are in, living in pretty impoverished conditions. So, I'd really like to make sure that the smaller schools and the more rural communities have what they need.
Right. On the 529 piece, it's interesting. I don't know if it was Jim Douglas or Peter Shumlin, but one of them came out with an idea, and I know the legislature never took it up, something very similar to what you're talking about, and it was giving every kid basically $100.
Yeah.
And it showed that and it might not have been it could have even been savings plans, like the old Pascal kind of thing. But once you kind of give them that money,
Yes.
It's something clicks there, and they're like, okay, this is mine, it's ownership, build, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's what he was, I can't remember his name, from VSAC. What was his name?
Scott Giles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, I think he said even $250 really increases a kid's chance, because it starts getting like you were just saying, it gets the wheels turning, and it starts making up, they start getting the conversations of, where should I invest this so that it grows? How much money do I have to put in per month? And, it starts long-term thinking about what their educational goals are.
I don't know where all this falls in public policy, but one of the things, I'm interested in public-private partnerships also. If there's somebody out there thinking to themselves, gosh, I'd really like to make a difference in a small state. I, as a business owner, as somebody that has the resources, would give $100 to every. If you could see where that kind of thing could also be another way to get resources like that. Okay, we'll have Scott in. We'll talk a little bit more about 529s. It also plays right into stuff, financial literacy. Like that.
Yeah. Did you have a question? You look like you were about to ask me something.
I have 100 questions.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Why don't you go next?
Financial literacy.
Okay.
I think we ought to, I'm not sure if it really has legs, but certainly is something which would think would be worth some of our time.
Yeah.
And then, as we were discussing earlier today offline about ensuring we understand the pension status.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the elephants in the room that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Forthright. That's all. Yeah, and I agree with the other topics. I think they're all quite worthy of our time.
Great. And there are also, you'll notice on the agenda, there are a couple of things on there that I just didn't see it risen up to be top priorities. But what we'll do is we'll just what I like to do is keep reworking this list every couple of weeks and saying, hey, where do people feel like they should?
Can also add civics education.
Yeah.
To that too.
Yeah.
Financial literacy, maybe think of civics. too.
Yeah.
Yep, sure. That's a good idea. And I should mention, I've got CTEs on there. Hayden's reaching out to Rutland and to Bennington and to Vermont Tech, have them come in, I think, next week to also give us a sense of what's out there. What can we build on? What sorts of things can we do? Senator Williams.
I like them all.
Okay.
One of the things I'm concerned about is just throwing money at a problem with declining. I understand there's extenuating circumstances to why the test scores are declining, but I think that we need to go back to establish a standard that for teachers, bringing teachers into the state where there is an evaluation process where they're not competing with teachers that don't meet a standard, and to bring them in. And the other concern I got is, this is probably not going to be very popular, but the fact that the tenure of substandard of teachers that don't meet that standard. So,
And I apologize. I did tell you that I would get some people in on that, and I did lose track of
That's
that.
okay.
So I'm glad you raised it again,
Yeah.
because I think it's completely legitimate. It's a good question. We should understand the process.
Yeah.
We should understand how, what it really looks like, what sorts of things have to be met, et cetera. Yeah, I think it's a great point. It's interesting. I teach at a college where there is no tenure. So most colleges and universities, what Bennington does is long-term contracts. So Liz Coleman, a couple presidents before sitting here, she would probably be advocating for talking about some of the problems with tenure. And they're both sides, but it's interesting.
Can I ask you a quick question, actually? To your point about evaluations, I just want to make sure that I heard it right, but are teachers at private schools, they're not held to the same standard as teachers in public schools, correct?
They're not.
We're gonna have people in hopefully next week, the head master of St. Johnsbury Academy,
Mhm.
to help us understand a little bit what their evaluations look like.
Okay.
They're
As
And
it relates
can
to
we
that.
compare side by side what it looks like but
Yeah,
not
please.
licensed in the same way.
right. And each private school can have its own evaluation system and its own standards, right?
Yeah, so we may find, could be wrong, that some are incredibly rigorous. We may find some aren't, so
Yeah.
I don't know if there's something out there that everybody needs to follow. It's a good question. Yeah,
Would you like to know my priorities?
Yeah.
So I hear you both, or everyone here, about the civics education as well as the financial literacy. But I'm a little loath to put another mandate on the plates of already stressed out school districts. So TBD on that one. But I
Can I just add
also,
something to that before? Because
Sure.
one of the things that just thinking about, there are all sorts of ways to peel the onion on this
yeah.
stuff, Because
no.
the way
talked
we did
about
the
that.
literacy thing is teachers are going through a training program. So
Yeah.
are there opportunities, sort of back to what Senator Williams was asking around teacher certification, evaluations? What does, how do you we ask ourselves, well, how are teachers keeping up their certifications?
Right.
And do we say, one of the things we'd like you to do is to understand literacy better? Or,
Right.
understand civics better. So there are just different ways,
Absolutely.
because the legislature can do as everybody has always told me, just about anything,
Right.
so.
So, yes, and Senator Campy and I talked a little bit about the fact that the Secretary of State is going to hire or has created this new position for engagement around civics education. And I guess I want to know a little bit more about that.
Mhm.
How is that going to influence curricula, schools, et cetera, before I wanted to, look at legislation. So that's that. And I think you guys heard my laundry list of priorities, everything from making sure that the student waiting system
Mhm.
gets
Yeah.
seen to fruition.
Yeah.
School construction, which I'm really busy on right now. Making sure the PCB thing has a plan, but it sounds as though now it does have a plan.
Carson B. Macon,
Person, yeah,
which the
Yeah.
House is starting on,
Yeah.
but it will come to us,
Yeah.
whatever that might be.
I put that under the umbrella of equity, but yes, absolutely. Is there anything else? Those are my biggies right now. And then I'm just getting small requests from constituents about really legislation that would change some legislation. That's, sometimes things get missed. And so fixing some of those things. But that's it.
Right. I believe we're receiving a civic education report back, looking at, to help give us a sense of what's happening out there in schools right now. So,
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I guess just general, well, maybe we'll talk about this later.
yeah, well, Danforth is going to be in tomorrow to talk to us about some of these kinds of things also.
Okay, great.
Anything else? Yeah, please.
Who's responsible for going back through regulations and bills and laws that, to make sure they're still pertinent, that they haven't, I mean, they haven't sunsetted, but I know it's probably legislative councils and they're probably overwhelmed.
Wouldn't that be us?
Yeah, but you look at those green books and you're thinking, gosh, some
We
of
keep,
that.
if we keep adding more and more laws on top of laws that already exist, the redundancy is concerning.
Yeah, and I think usually it kind of, from my experience, it's when somebody comes to the committee with an idea and you go and you check the green books and it's, it might be there or it's not being acted upon, that kind of thing. So I think it's kind of in the legislative process, those things usually pop up. I do know Leg Council reviews the green books periodically and does rewrites. We did a big rewrite last year of chapter 11, about 300 pages in the green books, just to, make sure it was all up to date. So I think generally Leg Council.
I'd like to see the first thing when somebody comes in with a bill,
Yeah,
or an idea.
yeah,
First thing is there already something in the books?
yeah, yeah,
And if it is, should we go back and amend it?
yeah.
Should we repeal it and then create a new one?
Yeah. It's a great point. And just so you know, it's not going to happen today, but almost every time somebody comes in to introduce a bill, we usually have Beth St. James with them.
Right.
So that she can say, here's a little bit of history, here's where it's at, and gives us some ideas and some background, which I think is always really helpful. Okay. Great. Thanks, everybody. Sue Siglowski, please, you want to join us at the table?
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's a new group of faces here in Senate Education. For those of you that do not know, Sue Siglowski is the Executive Director of the Vermont School Boards Association. Dan, how long have you been in that position as?
I have been in that position for a little over 3 years, and I've been with the association for 5 years.
Okay, yeah. And I can speak to her knowledge and expertise, and great to have you here.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
So we've asked you to come in and talk just a little bit, introduce yourself, give us some updates on what you're seeing and hearing from school board members, particularly with an eye toward COVID recovery, and things in general, and then some of your priorities for this year.
Absolutely. So for the record, I'm Sue Siglowski, Executive Director of the Vermont School Boards Association. Thank you very much for inviting me in. And I'd like to start just by briefly talking about the role of school boards, because it's really important to understand school boards' roles when we talk about the work of the VSBA and also our priorities. So as most of you probably know, school boards are not involved in the day-to-day operations of schools. We always say to school board members that it's their job to make sure that schools are well run. It's not their job to actually run the school. And so they provide student-focused oversight and assure delivery of an effective education program in their communities at a reasonable cost for their taxpayers. And so that, in a nutshell, is what their job is. There are 6 areas of responsibility that school boards in Vermont. The first is to engage the community to establish a vision for the school district. And this is a really important aspect of school board service. They also adopt policies, and their policies oftentimes are aligning with that vision that they have. They hire the superintendent and establish clear expectations for the superintendent. They develop a budget, which a lot of them are working on right now, finishing up their budgets to be presented to the voters. And they provide financial oversight throughout the year on that budget. They monitor progress towards the vision. So it's not enough just to establish a vision, but they need to make sure that progress is being made toward that. And then lastly, operate in an ethical and effective manner. And that relates to things like conflict of interest. So we like to say that serving on a school board is upholding the great American tradition of a free public education for all. And this tradition forms the foundation of our democracy, a well-informed citizenry. It's extremely important, as you all know, for students to develop critical and independent thinking, and that they understand how history can impact our future. So simply put, education is crucial for the future of our state, and school boards play an important role in the system. A little bit about the VSBA. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we were founded in 1961. The vision and mission of our organization has evolved over time, and just this past year, the VSBA Board of Directors went through a comprehensive strategic planning process to develop a new vision and mission. And as part of that process, they developed 8 beliefs, and I'm not going, they're all in my written testimony. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there were a few that just 3 that I wanted to highlight. One is that public education is the foundation of and for democracy. Another is public education in Vermont is critically important for a healthy democracy, is the engine that drives economic development, and is the core of a strong community. And then third, school boards and their communities need to understand the jobs, roles, and responsibilities of school boards and their members. And boards need to have professional development to be effective and efficient in their roles. So that is a very important focus of ours, always, and specifically now. These 8 beliefs are the foundation on which the vision and mission are built. The vision is that VSBA is a trusted leadership organization advancing the essential work of Vermont school boards so that each and every student is supported in their educational journey. We used to have a much longer vision, and so it's nice to have it be 1 sentence. And then the mission is also 1 sentence, which is develop and provide systems and resources that support school boards and their members, informed through inclusive community engagement. The VSBA is a membership organization, and an important point is that we understand that not all school board members see every issue the same way. The VSBA has clear processes for taking positions as an organization, and it's possible you're going to hear from individual school board members who have a different perspective. And we welcome all school board members to share their views with VSBA and also with all of you. The VSBA has a 24-member board of directors. There's a president, immediate past president, and 22 regional representatives. We have 11 regions and 2 representatives from each region of the state. The current president is Neil Odell of Norwich, and you may see him come in here and testify on issues for your committee. The VSBA is governed by bylaws, resolutions, and policies. And I'll just take a minute to talk about resolutions. These are positions taken by the association on issues that are important to Vermont school boards. They can include recommendations for actions by the VSBA. They could also include recommendations for actions by the legislature. They are guidance for our staff and board when they're working in the public policy arena, or also developing programs and services for our members. And important to know about our resolutions is that they're voted on at our annual meeting by membership. And so we typically have our annual meeting in October. New resolutions passed by VSBA membership in October of 2022 covered the following topics: public funds accountability, district quality standards, funds to assist school districts with PCB and radon remediation, and universal meals. And so when I come in and testify to your committee on these topics, I'll provide the specific language of the resolution that was passed in my written testimony. And I provided a link to the full list of resolutions in my written testimony today, if you'd like to take a look at them. If there is not a resolution on the topic that I'm coming in to testify about, I get direction from either the VSBA board or its legislative committee. So that is the process that we use. We are a small organization. There's only 4 full-time staff, including me. And with me today is Sandra Cameron, the Associate Executive Director. And you'll see Sandra in here quite often. We also have Phil Gore, who is the Director of Board Services, and Carrie Lamb, who's the Director of Operations. Now I'll talk a little bit about the services and resources for our members. Senator Campion, I know Hayden mentioned that you had some questions about training for new board members and existing board members, so that's where I'll cover this. We provide many training opportunities for school board members, including monthly webinars, which are free for our members, workshops on the essential work of Vermont school boards. We provide board retreats, customized board development, where we will have a meeting with the board chair and anyone else on the board who wants to participate about what the needs of the board are, and then develop our program specifically to meet those needs. We also offer workshops on team building and advancing educational equity. We have a lot of resources online on our website. We also hold an annual conference in the fall for school board members, and we have regional meetings in our 11 regions where we share best practices and foster a learning community among school board members. Our resources and services have long been informed, as I say, by best practices, research, and examples from across Vermont, and thought it would be important to note that we're updating our curriculum this year to support a school board's success in meeting and exceeding the upcoming district governance standards. I'm not sure if anyone has talked to your committee yet about the governance standards. So in last year in Act 127, which was the weighting study bill, there was a requirement that each Vermont school district meets school district quality standards adopted by the rule of the Agency of Education. And those had to cover business, facilities management, and governance practices of school districts. So the Secretary of Education contacted VSBA over the summer and asked us to develop draft governance standards for his consideration to be incorporated into those newly required district quality standards. So this past summer and fall, the VSBA did this work by convening a task force of 11 school board members from across the state. Before outlining their work, the task force met with the secretary, and he provided them with some guidance of what he was looking for. And then they spent a significant amount of time this fall meeting, conducting their work. They reviewed national research on best practices in governance, particularly those studies relating to how school boards can affect student outcomes and close achievement gaps. They invited input from publicly elected school board members, superintendents, and representatives from the Act 1 working group. The final version of the proposed draft standards was approved by the full VSBA board in November, and we then sent it to Secretary French And he has included it in his draft district quality standards without any changes as far as I am aware. It recognizes that effective governance by school boards is an essential component in district quality, and it outlines 3 categories for effective governance. Those are priorities, protocols, and processes. And I provided a link in your testimony to the document that we submitted to the secretary. Next, consulting services.
We just pause there just
Yeah,
to see if
sure.
anybody has any questions about training in particular. I
Absolutely.
think the only thing that I was gonna ask is, do you have a sense of the percentage of people, percentage of school board members that go through training? Because it is optional.
Right, it is optional. I could try to get that data for you. We do keep track of who participates, but there's no, as you say, there's no requirement that they do. The only thing that is required is under 16 VSA, I think it's 561B, the superintendent and board chair are required to do 8 hours of training annually. And again, that's not really tracked or enforced by the state, but there's specific areas that training is supposed to cover, such as educational leadership, open meeting law, Public Records Act, collective bargaining. There's a couple other things in there as well. So we provide that training, that joint training for superintendents and board chairs, and get I would say a pretty good participation rate in that training.
I hate to have you waste your time, but if you could, I'm just trying to get a guesstimate, like, is it 50%, is it 25%? You know, I don't want you to sit there and count, but if you could come back with some kind of just idea of who you're, you know, what kind of, you know, are you getting folks or not?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that would
I'd be
great.
happy to do that. And we do also offer training specifically for new board members.
Mhm.
And that really focuses on their role and on the 6 areas that I spoke about at the beginning of my testimony. So that we really encourage all new board members to do that training, because when it's really a lot to get up to speed on when you join the school board. So the other thing I should mention is that every single new board member, as long as they're a member of the VSBA, gets this book that we revise every couple of years to keep it up to date. And it's the essential work of Vermont school boards, and it's got a lot of valuable information in it.
Senator Weeks.
Just a curiosity question on the training availability. You say so every new member and such. What about the candidate? You know, going backwards a couple of steps, because lots of folks want to get involved. They're not quite sure what they're getting involved in. And, you know, school boards are no different. That,
Right.
You know, if the training were available, or you know, to gain those insights, it could be, could get them better prepared for their essential duties. And if if they're not successful with the campaign, at least they understand the board process better.
Yes, that's,
Senator
we
Weeks, for
agree.
example, would have run years ago. Had to realize, this is what Senate education was done.
Right.
Exactly.
We do have a webpage for prospective school board members, and that's something, the idea that you put out there is something we've been talking about and hope to do, which is a webinar for people who want to run for school boards so that they can learn more about it.
Good.
So, yes.
We've been talking about this recruitment idea to get teachers here, kind of goes along the same lines. Is there, at least in Bennington, sometimes there's a, hey, who's going to run? Who, you know, can we fill this spot? And I don't know if there's any kind of thought to getting it out there more. I don't know how to do it, but you know, to really put some kind of recruitment document together, say, come serve on your school board, you know, help build up our democracy, help young kids, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we do have a brochure that we send out to the town offices that people can pick up. We also have a public service announcement that is on that prospective board members website. But
I'm afraid in like 10
yes,
years,
we're-
like young people don't even know what a brochure is.
I know,
You know,
I
mean, it's
know.
all this, you know, so it's,
yeah,
yeah, but yeah,
yeah, we probably should be using social media to get it out there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, yes.
It's hard enough to get volunteers to do anything in
I
local
know.
government. So if you make it a requirement, you're gonna maybe turn some people off that might.
You mean the training requirement? Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah,
So
some,
it's good
some-
there's options.
right, yeah. Yeah, some states make it required and others don't. It kind of varies across the nation.
Yeah.
Any more
Any other
questions on?
questions on this part? Okay.
Okay, I'll just briefly touch on consulting services. We support boards with operational and management challenges. So if they have a particular problem they're having, we will help them try to navigate through that. Also strategic planning, which is a really important aspect of board, and not enough boards do it. And then we have specialized services available to help them with superintendent searches, superintendent evaluations, and if they use policy governance, we have information for them about that as well.
Sue, may I ask you a question about the consulting piece
Yeah,
around strategic planning? You know, closing these achievement gaps. You know, we've seen these test scores well before COVID starting to go down. I mean, is there a way, and perhaps this is going to be coming to us in some of this, something that we've asked the agency to kind of provide for us, but is there almost, I'm just thinking, when we do like renewable energy policy, we have town plans, we have things that say, we don't want this here, we want it there. Is there a way for us to get kind of super focused on schools and say, hey, this is this schools or this district, this is how they're going to close their achievement gap?
I think that the district quality standards are going to
Okay, help with some of that?
help with that.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Next is legal and policy services. This is a really important aspect of what we do. Of course, we can't provide legal representation to school districts, but if they have general legal questions, we can often point them in the right direction. We give them updates on changes to the law. We provide legal training for boards and superintendents, for example, on the open meeting law, which is a really important aspect of law for them to understand. And then we also publish model school board policies. We have over 50 of them. Those are on our website if you want to take a look at them. Some of them are what we call required. Those are the ones where you or Congress has said that they must have a policy. And there are many of those. In addition, there are some others that we recommend. And those are on our website. Next is communications. We keep all our members up to date on what's happening here in the legislature while you're doing your work. And then at the end, we do a final comprehensive legislative report that lets them know these are the changes to education law that have happened this year. We send them weekly update emails every Tuesday throughout the year. We've always got something that we need to make sure that they know about. For instance, yesterday, when I sent the weekly update email, we included H42 that the House passed yesterday.
Senator Williams.
Can you go back to, you don't provide legal service, but do they have, most towns have a attorney on, like they do for the select board, for
Right.
example? How about the Vermont League of Cities and Towns? Do you work with them at all for? Are they interfaced at all with the school boards?
They don't interface directly with school boards, but we do communicate with them quite often on different
Right.
legislative issues and that type of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not really their lane. but-
Right. They're sort of like we're sort of like their equivalent for school boards. We do for
Right.
school boards
Okay.
what they do for towns.
I guess that's what I was fishing
Yeah.
for.
Yes, yeah. On communications, I also wanted to mention that we published the education law book, and that's a green book that has all of the pertinent education laws for Vermont. We do that annually. This year, our publication is a little bit held up by our publisher, but it should be coming out soon. I know everybody's been waiting for that. And then I already mentioned this essential work of Vermont school boards. I wanted to talk a little bit about educational equity because that's an extremely important part of our work. We have a definition of education equity that's in our model equity policy. And we have collaborated with 2 consultant teams to address educational equity in a variety of ways. One of them helped us with our with 11 of our model policies, working on some language changes in them. And the other one provided real-time support to board chairs and superintendents that had challenging situations that they were facing. And it was really quite valuable. We've also provided some webinars to advance equity through those same consultants and also through Outright Vermont. In addition to providing these resources, we're currently developing a curriculum and related materials for school boards to support their work in analyzing and responding to data on student achievement outcomes. So that relates back to what your previous question, I think, Chair Campion, too, about looking at outcomes and how can we close the gap. Yep.
Somewhat related on the equity issue. I don't know if you were in here when we were talking a little bit about some of our priorities, and we were looking, again, it's not necessarily a rural urban divide, but there are a lot of small schools that don't have the same thing, same offerings. And I'm wondering if you could say a few words on that. You having probably one of the best views out there of the whole state, what sort of discrepancies exist? Or, and I can be more specific. How serious is the problem that some kids can just go to high school and get 1 class Spanish, so you can go to another high school and get 5, foreign language offerings? You got a kid that all he or she wants to do is study calculus, but it only goes to algebra, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Do you have specific data about that?
I don't. That's why I'm wondering if you have some of that. That's what we're trying to pull apart. Is there a big problem there, or are we? I mean, anecdotally, I've heard concerns, and years ago, you probably remember when Tom Sullivan was the president of UVM, it went around here a lot, the kid that didn't get into UVM because the school only offers 2 years of math.
Right.
And they, of course, made an exception to the rule. But can you give a sense, is that a problem out there?
I would love to see some data on
Okay.
that, because I don't think I'm able to respond without
Okay.
being able to look at that. But I can tell you that if there is a big discrepancy,
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is going to help is the district quality standards. And I also think it's going to be interesting to see how the implementation of the new weights plays out, and whether that helps to level the playing field.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think your point kind of goes back to what I said for one of my priorities, is that Act 60, which was the equity in education bill. I think over the years, that was 1979, that maybe we've kind of gotten away from that. And that's a law that's been through the Supreme Court of Brigham versus State. And we keep rewriting the definition of equity. What that did to a lot of the schools that had excellent programs, so that they were equal. I don't think they intended to tear down schools with a good program, but it tried to make the curriculum equal across the board and all the financially. I think that we are, and I think we're going to talk about Act 60, right?
Yeah.
60 and 68.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's an interesting history, and I don't remember what was sort of there before, but I am concerned that what's there now does need beefing up, and how, again, if you happen to be born in a certain area, how do you make sure that, you get what you need, basically.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yes. Last on equity, I just wanted to let you know that we've been awarded grant funds to develop an affinity group for school board members. And the purpose of an affinity group is to share stories, experiences, and ideas, and provide a space for school board members across the state to network and make connections on issues of educational equity. And our first affinity group is going to bring together school board members who are Black, Indigenous, people of color. So we're excited to get started on that. Next is the last of our services to our members is advocacy. So the VSBA provides representation of its membership, which I should mention is over 900 locally elected school board members in the General Assembly, and also in public policy development with the Agency of Education and the State Board and various other education organizations. And at times, we're also tasked by the General Assembly to be a member of task force groups and advisory councils and the like. Getting toward the end of my testimony, and wanted to provide you with some information about our priorities for this legislative session. First, I wanted to highlight the significant facilities needs across the state. The state hasn't provided support for school construction since 2007, I believe, and it's really starting to show in the condition of our school buildings. And though that condition is causing significant health and safety issues in some places. And really, it's also an equity issue because some school districts are able to garner the local community support to pass a bond to do renovations or construction, and others are not able to do that. And research shows that the quality of school facilities impacts student achievement. So comes right back to your question, Chair Campion. I think there's so many.
Send me that
aspects.
research.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Yeah.
So inequities in school buildings can lead to inequities for students. Along with serious concerns about the general condition of school buildings, the VSBA advocates that the legislature allocate funds to assist school districts with PCB and radon remediation when contamination is identified under state mandated testing. And we wanted to make sure to include that because that's one of the resolutions that was passed by our members at the annual meeting. Second, I wanted to draw your attention to the increasing mental health needs of Vermont students. And this topic has been mentioned by several other witnesses, so I'm not going to go into any great detail, but we certainly do hope that you will take the mental health needs into account when considering how to handle any excess in the education fund. Rather than returning that money to taxpayers to reduce property tax rates, we recommend using it to provide facilities aid and to address the mental health needs of Vermont's students. Additionally, since it appears that the surplus exists at least partially due to lower special education spending, please consider using part of it to help school districts address their special education needs. I've heard from a lot of school board members about their districts facing challenges under the new census block funding for special education that was implemented with Act 173, specifically that the block grants are substantially less than expected and causing them to actually have to eliminate some positions. And finally, VSBA advocates ensuring educational equity in the wake of the United States Supreme Court's decision in Carson v. Macon. The most recent VSBA resolution related to this topic passed in October of 2022 at the annual meeting. The resolution calls for public funds accountability and advocates that all rules, regulations, policies, quality standards, reporting requirements, and laws regarding public schools in Vermont must apply to any school that receives funds from the statewide education fund for any reason or for any purpose. That's directly from the resolution. As part of the Education Equity Alliance, the SBA supports the values of equity, transparency, and accountability, and we're open to any reforms that align with these values and that pass Supreme Court muster. And with that, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and certainly look forward to working with you during the upcoming session.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you.
Questions for Sue? Comments? Yeah, please.
Of course I have comments. I just want to say, and I'm not just saying this because the executive director is here and the assistant executive director, but this is just an unbelievably wonderful organization. It's one of the most high functioning organizations I've ever been a part of. It's well run, it's student focused and student centered, and we often don't agree with each other, but we're very respectful. And because it's such a high functioning group, it's, you know, we get stuff done and we get it done in a really collaborative way. So I just wanted to make that plug. But I also, as a school board member, have found their resources to be so incredibly helpful. I must have watched your little 12-minute video on school funding like 25 times, just over and over and over again until it was like, okay, I think I got this. So those resources, but also, you know, a lot of folks get on school boards and immediately feel like they just want to like take over and fix everything. And it's really hard because that's not really your job. And it was really important for me, and it was a learning process. And the VSBA helped me with it. It's like, you're up here, you're high level, you know, you're not operational. And that's a tricky one because people want to be operational. And one of the things that I've worked hard to do in my community is educate the public about what our jobs are, because you wouldn't believe how many people will come up to you and say, I won't even give you any specific examples, but something very inappropriate about what they want you to do. And you're just like, that's really not my job. Please email the principal or email the teacher or email the superintendent. But they don't understand. They really think that you are gonna be, have your hands in the weeds making these changes, and that's really not your job. So it's been really helpful for them to work with our board as to what it is we should be doing and not doing. And Phil Gore came and helped us this summer at a retreat, and that was wonderful. So that's just my perspective. I wanted to share it with you. And thanks, Sue and Sandra.
Thank you, Senator Duke.
What do school board members get paid?
That varies by district, from 0 to,
Zero? Okay,
yeah, I mean, some school board members get paid, you know,
$1,000.
maybe, yeah, or 500, you know, it varies, but it's not very much. It's approved by the voters of each district.
I don't know, I think this is accurate. You know, school board race in the city of Los Angeles can cost somebody like hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe $1 million to get elected. To oversee the LA public schools. It's a big job, big campaign. It's a big job here. But I don't know, I wish we could round more people up who are interested in doing it. For sure.
Yeah, we're always working on that. So if you have any ideas, we're happy to hear them.
Yeah, get off the brochure maybe. That's my only thought. You know, maybe we do kind of move away from the brochure and kind of do some kind of ads on social media, you know, hire some young guy or something to get it out there a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
My observation is that folks tend to run when things aren't going well, but as long as things are running smoothly, they tend to just sort of, you know, we have to, I will be actively going out trying to recruit someone to run in my position, you know, most
Yeah.
likely. So, yeah.
Anything else?
Just, you didn't come in with many demands, but if you had a magic wand, knowing the limited amount of time that this committee has to work on important issues, which ones do you think would be the most important to work on?
Yeah, I'm hoping that you could work on all three that I mentioned, which is mental health and the facilities and addressing the equity issues for the Carson v. Macon decisions.
I think Aaron's already worked, actually along that line. I assume you testify in front of other committees.
Yes,
Is your list different for other committees? Or
no,
is the list consistent?
no, the list is consistent.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we budgeted a little bit too much time for this, which is great. So we get a little bit of a break before Beth is going to join us a little early. She's going to join us at 2:45. So people have 15 minutes or so to stretch their legs and make a phone call.